Okay, welcome. Great. This is an incredible experience. We're doing the first Zoom mixed with live event, and welcome back. We're sort of post-COVID and we don't have masks on. It's pretty exciting. And we're doing it internationally with Dan in the Philippines and many of us now in person in Palo Alto, in fact, at our speaker's house, which is very exciting to get people actually together in conversation. So thank you for joining. I have the very difficult task of introducing our speaker, who has just got so many accolades and so many wonderful things that she's done that I can barely read the list, which would be just appalling because she's a much better speaker than me. But she's written, I think, 8 books. But the theme of them is incredibly important for all of us to look at how people rewrite history in their own version. And she's been a sleuth, as she calls herself, going behind historic monuments and various historic events and other, what do you call them, effigies to history to say what's really gone on here. And she's going to focus today on the Celts or the Celts, however you like to say it. I thought they were actually just a baseball team or something, but apparently they're bigger than that. And they were pre-Roman, so that's really a big deal. She also is a lawyer, which is amazing, and also her husband is too. And he's with us, who's sitting next to me. I don't know if you can see him, but he's also been on the journey with Jacqui, helping do the detective work as well. So she writes beautifully. She makes films beautifully and takes photographs beautifully as well, and speaks incredibly eloquently. So I hope that you'll enjoy both her movie and her speaking. But what we really want to do is promote the petition that she put together that's at the end of the invite that you got. And I hope that people will read that and look at how we can fight against rewriting such events as the January 6th event and others, but particularly towards the issue of how women have been portrayed in history. Mm-hmm. So I turn it over to Jacqui.
Boyana and Joy and Shannon have put on the most gorgeous feast outside, and it's a beautiful day here. And we're now all around the table, and it just feels so good. Thank you, NextNow, for making this possible. Thank you, Boyana. Boyana's been my friend for 1,000 years and has been so supportive in all of these efforts. We've just had an amazing time in Slovenia too, with presentations and so on. So we've got a lot of history, and she has just done excellent work in making all this happen. So a million thank yous to you, Bill Dahl, and you, Dan, and all of NextNow. I really appreciate this opportunity. Here's our plan. We've got a short film, and then a slideshow, and then Q&A, and 2 poems along the way. The whole point of this talk is to share with you what we found, that in pre-Christian Celtic Europe, women were treated as equals. That changed when the Roman Empire invaded Europe. When Rome was in charge, women then had no rights. This same thing continued when the Christians took over from Rome, and then Christians continued the policy of denigration and suppression of women, leading us to where we are today. We feel that by knowing this, we can bring change and renew the partnership relationship and restore balance to the culture. By way of introduction, I'd like to show you a short film.
Well, I disagree with some of this.
You're entitled.
Yeah. There's kind of a comment section after this little movie.
Can whoever's talking stop, please?
Thank you very, very much. I want to talk with you about women and why it is so important for us to confront the real facts about history, because it's really the story of ourselves. Our ancestors confronted the same onslaughts and deceptions that we're facing. Look the other way. We're not attacking your government. We're just tourists. Not so fast. This is a matter of freedom. History is repeating itself. Divide and conquer has never died. One quick question, please. Do any of you consider yourselves Celtic? Please just ask yourself that question now, and then again at the end of the presentation, if you would. The most important thing to know about the Celts is that they loved, honored, and revered their women in a way that we no longer do. The second most important thing to know is that together, men and women created a world in which family and nature were priorities. Celts venerated scholars and inventors, celebrated achievement, and welcomed guests with hospitality. And the Celts prized and fought to protect their freedom. Today's Europeans are descendants of the Celts who inhabited all of Europe before Christianity and before the Romans. Although Celts were besieged almost endlessly, they were not erased. The stunning wealth and success of Celts have been claimed by their conquerors. Unlike the way the Romans portrayed the Celts as pagan or barbaric, Celts were in fact a highly artistic, rich culture that valued their men and their women. The Romans decimated Celtic populations, but the descendants of those who survived still carry their passion for freedom with them. My goal is to make you aware of this illustrious past that belongs to all of us, as men and women together, and to see how we can use the knowledge of that past to right the wrongs that we're facing today, to regain male-female partnership, and to retire winner-loser conquests. For the past 2,000 years, Celtic women have suffered injustices that began with the Roman conquest and were further diminished by the Roman Catholic Church, punctuated with witch burnings. The history we're taught is fraught with falsehood. By starting from actual artifacts from the Iron Age, we can see behind the fallacies that conquerors have taught us. Tracking like this reveals the forces that are out to hurt women. These insights can shield us against a hideous history that repeats itself. Up one misconception now, Celts were all over Europe, not only in Ireland. No, their traces extend from the British Isles to France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Austria, the Czech lands. Consider this. Once Celts figured out how to smelt iron, that information spread like wildfire throughout Europe and Britain. This could not have happened without a very impressive communications network. And it could not have happened after Europe had been chopped up into feudal fiefdoms. It's becoming ever more apparent. The Christian conquest darkened a Celtic world that was bright with science, art, and natural beauty, and an egalitarianism that we desperately need today. This subject is vital because it goes to the very core of our lives, and it's a continuum. It derives from our ancestors and rises up into the generations to come. It goes to the heart of our values of equality and liberty for all. Why run at part strength? Why give up talent that could serve us all? Why shouldn't women have the same opportunities and recognition as men? Why should we settle for any less than a free and open society for all? I want you to see that we're still part of a vibrant Celtic culture, and that it's the conquerors we need to worry about. And I want you to come away with the conclusion that the equitable set of values cherished by the Celts permeates today's Europeans and are part of our culture too. Our goal is an age of enlightenment, a time of inclusivity, tolerance, opportunity, and liberty for everyone on the planet. Let's think together how to achieve this by looking at the past through the Celtic lens. I'd like to read my first poem to you. Who gains from defaming women? Not fathers or sons, certainly. But what about the false fathers who pretend to be family? How can you call someone father who has nothing to do with your birth? What happened to godwives, godwomen? Of them, there's surely a dearth. The mother bears the children and nurtures them too, it's clear. Why then vilify women to make humans disappear? These deviations from family use words without making sense, take inheritance from children, give status with filial pretense. Let's face it, there's a lot of the past that we need to review. We've been taught the wrong history. What is the right history? I'd like to go to some slides right now, so we'll have a slight pause while I screen share with you. So here's another version based on the archaeology we've seen and threads we've traced up to the present. So let's look at this map with names of Celtic families. The Celt inhabited all of Europe. Notice how widespread and numerous Celtic families are. You might recognize some of the names: Parisi near Paris, Galli in Gaul, Veneti in Venice, but also in France. Note too where Hallstatt is because it was an important mining center and credited with the discovery of iron smelting. One small word about pronunciation and spelling. Both were probably obscured on purpose, so it's important to think very broadly. Celt, Celt, Salt, Cell, they're all the same. These words are all probably originating from salt. The mining and trade of salt has been associated with the Celts for the past 3,000 years. Celts grew organically from the ground up. These networks of kinship knitted all of Europe together. Their trade networks crisscrossed Europe. Celtic men and women worked together from defense to gardening. In the days before Christianity, women worked side by side with men as druids, leaders, defenders, sages, healers, herbalists, teachers, scholars, inventors, engineers, architects, designers. Celtic laws from pre-Christian times reflect a culture in which the law benefited women, men, and family. The Celtic culture was not male-centric, as opposed to the way we are today. By stark contrast, Romans treated women as slaves, as possessions to be owned by fathers until they became their husband's property. Roman women could not hold property, could not inherit or bequeath property, and, with rare exception, had no political voice. We'll start with the Hallstatt era, the early Iron Age that's named for the village in the Austrian mountains where iron smelting revolutionized Celtic life. Centuries later, women were burned as witches nearby. Celtic artifacts were excavated in Hallstatt. There are also homages to women hidden in plain view here in the Celtic hall that is now a church. So Hallstatt pulls together a number of our threads. It was on two lakes, one in Austria, one in Switzerland. The two big advancements in Celtic culture occurred. Hallstatt on the Austrian lake gives its name to the Hallstatt era in around 800 years before the advent of Christianity. Some 800 years later, Julius Caesar came into Celtic Europe, to what is now Burgundy in France. He saw Celtic wealth and resources. Then he killed everyone he could. So here's what Caesar might have seen when he first came into Burgundy. This is an example of Iron Age Celtic goldsmithing found in Burgundy. Note the exquisite rhythmical precision and imagine the mathematics and knowledge of metallurgy required to make such a treasure. I want to illustrate this point further with this piece of gold jewelry buried in a woman warrior's grave near Alesia. Originally, it was identified as a male prince's tomb. Note the two tiny winged horses at either end. The detail is just unbelievable. Here's a close-up of one of the winged horses. Look at the thin strands of gold that are looped back and forth with stunning accuracy. Just to demonstrate that this kind of Celtic experience was shared widely in Europe, I want to show you a conical hat made of gold. Many similar to this have been found in France and Germany. The gold shoes were found near Stuttgart. This was the culture that Caesar saw when he came to Gaul just before the advent of Christianity. Caesar killed everyone he trapped in Alesia, with death tolls in the tens of thousands of men, women, and children. A Celtic warrior came from another part of Gaul in today's France, about 200 miles away, to try to reason with him as Caesar's slaves built battlements around the town to starve everyone inside. The warrior even offered himself if Caesar would free the women and children. Caesar's response? Caesar had that warrior taken back to the Colosseum in Rome and dragged to death behind a chariot as a public spectacle. And Caesar wannabes have been following his playbook ever since. These were the Caesar's tactics. Might makes right, rule by terror, take what you can, kill everyone in your way. And we're taught that Romans civilized Europe. Celts didn't go quietly. They prized their freedom. They fought for it, men and women. How do we know that? They honored defenders on gold coins and buried it with them in the tombs. Note the woman defender on this gold coin. Caesar wanted it both ways. He wanted to destroy people so they couldn't rise up against him, but he also wanted riches he couldn't produce. So he needed slaves who had the knowledge and expertise. He saw the Celtic gold coins. He wanted Roman gold coins. But notice the difference in subject matter he chose. The Roman soldier standing on the head of a captured Celt. This brings us to the current era. It took a few hundred years, but the Celts organized and eventually defeated Rome in the 5th century. Celts coordinated with other families to regain Celtic family capitals in the Rhineland and to drive the Romans out of their lands. 2 battles were led by women to avenge the death of their husbands at the hands of Romans. Here you see one of the couples from the Rhineland. Kriemhild avenged the death of her husband Siegfried by mounting a military charge against the Romans. Wagner made an opera based on these events, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy is based on the story of the Nibelungenlied, the heroic epic that recounts the tale. Rome fell in 476. By all indications, Celtic culture blossomed in relative calm for about 6 centuries after Rome fell. 5th century Europe regained its freedom. In the 5th century Merovingian era, a husband and wife, Clovis and Clotilde, led Europe. They came from the 2 Celtic families that were primarily responsible for Rome's ouster, the Franks and the Burgundians. The wife, Clotilde, was from the Burgundian family that reclaimed its capital on the Rhine River in today's Germany. The husband was a Frank, the family that organized the ouster of Constantine from his command at Rome's European headquarters at Trier. The Merovingians and the Carolingians that followed them built libraries and secular abbeys that were centers of learning and production. Women both founded and directed many of these early abbeys. What was an abbey then? A typical abbey would be fortified with high walls surrounding all of its lands. It would contain a fest hall, gardens, scriptoria, a library, dining halls, a winery, hearths for baking and metallurgy, and would welcome and provide accommodation for guests, scholars, and workers. What was life like in those times after the fall of Rome? It was the Celtic Iron Age Europe on steroids. Here's what I see from traces we have left from those times. Defense was still a key issue. Hill forts grew into refuge castles in their same strategic places, high on the mountains or surrounded by water. I'm showing you Bamberg, England, because Bamberg is a Celtic name still preserved. There's also a Bamberg, Germany. In the German Bamberg in the Middle Ages, thousands of women were burned as witches. Towns near Bamberg, Germany, also were the site of massive witch burnings and later persecutions in the Rhineland. Fest halls flourished at the edge of the market squares. Markets buzzed with the same products as the Iron Age: fish, salt, wine, textiles, silks, amber, glass, copper pots, and baskets. Medieval hot springs with gardens and pavilions drew winter crowds. Secular abbeys offered education, work, and housing to men and women. Following the tradition of his mother and grandmother in the 8th and 9th centuries, Frankish leader Charlemagne founded 4 abbeys near the Rhineland. The arched alcoves in the front of the abbeys and fest halls often honor heroes. So this abbey at Prüm likely honors Charlemagne's grandmother as founder. Let me clarify too, please, that I'm fully convinced that Charlemagne did not convert to Christianity for reasons I explain in the book that I've written about him. By the 11th century, the Roman Christians began their crusades in Celtic Europe using the same Roman divide and conquer tactics. Armed monks rampaged Europe. These crusades attacked the south of France, which was then called Gaul and inhabited by Celts. The crusades also attacked the Baltic region, leaving a broad swath of the area depopulated. They made brutal, concentrated assaults, but they also infiltrated every burg and hamlet. They installed priests in the places the Celts loved to gather most and converted them into churches, the fest halls. Refuge castles were overtaken to house newly minted nobility. Roman Christian missionaries imposed new languages and even a new script, Cyrillic. Borders, nationalities, religions, all were used to slash apart Celtic connectedness and to keep the Celtic populace weak, poor, and sick. Piety has masked hideous atrocities such as these for 2,000 years. The Christians used Roman law and courts to carry out their campaigns of terror. Secularism was criminalized for 1,400 years by heresy laws. The church state allowed no thought, no expression, no art, no speech, no writings that were not created by the church. Celtic freedom dissolved into feudal fiefdoms. Not only were Celts left landless, but they also became the property of others to be bought and sold. By overtaking the abbeys, the Roman Christian church state controlled education and taught fiction as truth. They excised the Celts from history. Secular abbeys had sprung up like mushrooms all over Europe after the 5th century fall of Rome, and numbered in the thousands by the 12th century. They had served as an open network for learning, apprenticeship, and collaboration across the Celtic world. With the Christian conquest, these thriving complexes either were turned into all-male religious enclaves or fell into ruin after the Celts were driven away. How did women go from being founders and directors of abbeys to being excluded from them? Christians besieged the abbeys and installed their own people, or they destroyed them. Christian conquest did not happen everywhere at once. The time of Christian takeover of an area can be marked by when the abbeys turned male only. The defacement of statuary of females also has been found to correlate to the Christian takeover. Feudal fiefdoms took over the markets, castles, abbeys, hot spring resorts, and put them under the exclusive control of the nobility. People were forced to swear fealty to masters, both seen and unseen, as a show of servitude. Droit de seigneur meant that noble men could do what they wanted to all females. The church state hunted and killed all those that it tagged as heretics and witches, with women explicitly targeted. Roman Christians singled out the women as a major foe and pursued a vendetta against them. They called them the gates of hell. They blamed women for being thrown out of the gardens of paradise, an ancient version of blame the victim. And Eve's sin was eating an apple from the tree of knowledge. Think about that, the tree of knowledge. At this point in the story, we need to stop and laud our Celtic men. When women everywhere in Europe had a price on their heads and were tracked by Christian bounty hunters, the men hid them away in refuge castles and safe houses. The tables had shifted. Instead of the early women avenging their husbands before Rome fell, the medieval men defended and had to hide their women when Roman Christian crusaders returned. If they did escape, where did people go? They went where they could, to refuges that had not been conquered, to places that would take them in, to safe houses, as refugees. You see where this is going. It doesn't have to be this way. We are a country of immigrants, of refugees. How do our individual stories relate back to these conquests? To put this into context, Europe suffered under draconian heresy laws for most of the current era. During that time, heresy laws gave the church the authority to accuse people as heretics and have them burned at the stake. The powers of church and state worked hand in hand to kill untold thousands. Like a tornado, they leave a wake of devastation where they've been. The curtain was pulled back just enough to expose some of those dark days of imperial oppression just before World War I. And who conducted excavations in Hallstatt, Austria, to uncover a lost world of Celts? A woman, the Duchess of Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg is now in northeastern Germany, but the Duchess made the digs in Austria and Slovenia with the help of a French archaeologist. Everything about her reads Celtic to me. Harvard Press wrote a book about her archaeological finds, and Harvard's Peabody Museum contains part of her collection. To recap, let me just say that I've come to these conclusions gradually as I've researched and written 8 books. There's a reason that the woman holds the statue of justice and the torch of freedom. She fights for her family's freedom right alongside the men. But there's also a reason that women have been vilified. We see religious suppression rampant in our own country. Our own American lands were taken by force from those who were already here. Male supremacy has been forced on Native peoples all over the world, and it's been done under the flag of religion in most cases. Many of us are the children and grandchildren of people who have been forced to flee their European homelands to seek refuge in this country. We are the very people we're talking about. We're Celts. That's why religion must be kept separate from governance. Religion is not based on fact. It is not for the common good. It does not benefit the entirety. It is anti-science and against reason. It serves as a cover for atrocity and enslavement. What is the takeaway? Let me summarize by saying this. Religion is a master-servant scheme. In other words, blind obedience. No independent thinking allowed. Christianity enslaved medieval Europe. The French Revolution marked the second fall of Rome, but Rome has been attacking us since Julius Caesar. Whether it's called feudalism, colonialism, imperialism, the church state, Putin, or Trump, it's all the same. A band of white elite males wants to be our master and make all the rest of us their servants. They can even tell us in their teachings. Religion is a cover, a way to claim superiority over the rest of us. While stealing from us, they berate us for being poor. While making us suffer, they scoff at our frailties. They kill us and displace us. But when they threaten our children, they've got us. We must take it head on. It's time to end Christianity's stranglehold on the Celtic family. We hope you can see our line of reasoning. The pre-Christian Celtic world treated women as equal. That changed when the Roman Empire invaded Europe. Rome treated women as chattel with no rights. When the Christians took over from Rome, they continued the policies of denigration and suppression of women, leading us to where we are today. We think by knowing this, we can bring change and regain these Celtic ideals of balance and partnership between men and women. Now, in the spirit of giving credit where it's due, let's take one moment to pay homage to our female ancestors. And now I'd like to recite my second poem. All hail to you, ye mothers of Eld. Hail to your sons and daughters. All of them breathe because of you. They owe their strength to your powers. You are the ones who protected their world. You built the Europe of yore. Though conquerors claimed it and many defamed it, your wisdom and leadership soared. You have borne the families here now. You fled with forebears and hid them. You fought to the end, defended the fort, all while you nourished and led them. Too long you've stayed buried down deep, away from the knowing I, kept from your place up here in the sun, where lineage live now and thrive. Now is your time, O prescient ones. Now is the time to acknowledge. Let history herald you and your kin. All hail to you and your knowledge. Let's stand together. There's one action we can all take. Please sign our petition on MoveOn by clicking on the link on the NextNow website. You can also go to either of our two websites that you see on the screen, Lexicus Press, our publishing house, and Hidden Women Books, the website for the Hidden Women series. One must, in our minds, too, is to establish research institutes that study Europe from the Celtic perspective. And another way that we can all pitch in is to make this presentation go viral and post a link. Here are some ways to start changing perceptions. Remove under God from the pledge to the flag. Take God off US currency. Prohibit prayer and all references to God out of government events. Separate education from religious teachings. Now, in just a minute, we'll want to know what are your thoughts. Let me ask you again, are you Celtic? We see that the present attitudes on women spring from Rome and the Roman Christian religion. Let's go back to those Celtic ideals of liberty and justice for all. Women are being put down because of religion. Do you agree? Can you help? But I want to thank you for listening. Blair and I are very excited about what we've been finding and hope that together all of us can revitalize the future.